Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Reality Writes. I am author Ellie Alexander, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things bookish, writerish, and pretty much anything else that crosses our mind. And I'm here with the tech guy.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm a little frazzled this week. We're back in this studio.
In this now.
Our separate studios for lack of a better description, and mine is a disaster. It's just a mess. It's a complete mess. I'm back to the office 5 days a week, so I'm suddenly seeing the effects of constantly just bringing stuff in here and setting it on my desk. So
the piles have expanded.
Not even sure what's there, to be honest. I just moved a whole pile of stuff to the floor behind me, but just so we could record this episode. But I've got cables everywhere. It's just.
The question is, are you motivated to actually do anything about it, or are you just sort of fine with it being messy for a while?
I'm just fine with it being messy for a while, especially since, it's it's just one of those things where it'd probably feel good if it was clean, but I have other things that I want to be spending my time on right now.
That's how it goes. Well, today we're spending our time by recording a new episode for our darlings out there. And this week we're going to talk about blurbs.
Blurbs.
Whoa.
All right.
Because I think it's always interesting from the writer end and the reader end in terms of how blurbs work. But the first question I have is what do you think of a blurb? Has a blurb ever made you buy a book or swayed you to buying a book or getting the book from the library?
Well, how about if we take it one step farther back for any of the darlings of listeners out there that might not know what a blurb is. You're talking about the thing from other authors on the book that's like a riveting tale of science and fiction combined with Dan Brown meets Stephen King and a little bit of Ellie Alexander thrown in. Yeah.
I like the sound effects. This is nice. I wasn't anticipating.
Something like that. That's what you're talking about, right? That's the blurb. Okay.
That's a blurb. Yes. Okay. So the blurbs are part of the marketing tool for any book, especially if you're launching a new book or a new series. And they are written by other authors in your genre, which we'll talk about. And they usually go on the front cover of the book, a couple on the back, and then if you're really abundant, you might have 2 or 3 pages right after the copyright page of multiple blurbs before a reader starts reading.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have some questions about blurbs in general, but let's get back to your question. You wanted to know for readers out there.
Yeah, I want to know from our darlings, but I also want to know from you.
Me.
Because, usually, and we're going to talk about this on the next episode, but we spend a lot of time at bookstores, but we go our separate ways in the bookstore.
Yes.
And now we meet up when we're done. And so I'm just curious, has a blurb ever pulled you in, or have you been reading the back cover and then you see, another favorite author of yours? If somebody's it's Martha Wells meets blah blah blah.
Right. If Martha Wells blurbs a book, I'm probably gonna buy it. Yeah. I just I love Martha Wells. If James Rollins blurbs a book, I'm gonna buy it. And for all the James Rollins haters out there, just what? Go your own way. Because I love him. And his books are just, they're outlandish, but man, if you read the amount of research that goes into that guy's books, some of it is not too far off with what we're experiencing these days. So it's I think so. I think where I'm skeptical though, where I'm really skeptical is when a blurb says something like the voiceover I did a minute ago. If some author that I don't know, or even one I do know, says this is, Michael Crichton meets James Rollins meets, whoever. I just, I don't know about that, because that's that seems too good to be true. That seems too good to be true. I feel like if there was a book out there that was if the story was really the combination of 2 or 3 amazing authors, like, how would that not be the number one bestseller of all time? Like, instantly, right? So, I don't know. I'm skeptical of those, but, if Martha tells me that this book is a fantastical tale of, like, adventure and intrigue or whatever, I'm gonna be like, "Yeah, I'll check it out."
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree. Long before I was writing professionally, when I was reading, not that I don't read now, I read prolifically now, but when I was in the bookstore just as a reader, like not looking through it and any other lens, I would often, if a favorite author was blurbing a book, and or if it was something like, I'm trying to think of an example, like the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Society. Let's say, somebody's like, it's in that same tone.
Mm,
I'm probably gonna snap it up. I might be a little more discerning first and still read the back cover and, like, make sure it feels right. Maybe I'll even cheat and read the first few pages in the bookstore and go, "Okay, yeah, yeah, I'm vibing on this." But I would say for sure over the years, I have been swayed to purchase a book or grab one from the library because of a blurb.
okay. What about is it still a blurb if it's like the same sort of description, but then it's like the, you know, Topeka Gazette or,
Oh,
where there's no like it's like the newspaper itself wrote the blurb, like who there's it's not credited to anyone. So then it's like, well, I mean, how legit are those?
those are legit. I mean, the publishing houses, reach out for those, and those fall more under, like, a pull quote or, like, a review even sometimes. So
Okay.
that's, like, a separate part of the marketing plan that's different from the blurb. So, they're reaching out to, like, the New York Times book reviewer and people like that, San Francisco Book Review, the Topeka Gazette, like, they'll like, big or small publications, depending on, the publishing house and the budget and all of those kinds of things, they're gonna reach out, completely. Now, one question that I have heard so often from the darlings is whether or not authors get paid to blurb a book, and the answer is no, absolutely no, because you don't want any sort of, like, financial strings attached, I guess. It's like anything else. You want an honest review. Um, so should we get into a little bit of how they work, or did you have another question?
Well, I mean, let's get into how they work because
Okay.
and maybe I'll ask the question and then we can get into how they work
Sure.
because I
Yeah.
think you'll explain this. But like, do authors really read the books that they blurb?
I
Like,
read every yes, right? I know.
right.
The answer for me is 100% yes. If I'm putting my name on a book, I will have read it. And okay, so the way that it works is publishing houses and agents, and then sometimes the authors themselves are the ones reaching out for the blurb. And this is especially terrifying and horrible when you're a brand new baby writer, because one of the questions on the intake form from the publicity team will be, who do you know that you can reach out to for blurbs? And I remember when I filled it out the first time, I was like,
Right.
oh my gosh, like all of my writing friends were just starting to write too. We were all kind of launching into the world at the same time.
Right.
Um, and so the book will be not quite finished. It'll be up for like NetGalley. It hasn't gone through like final copy edits or page proofs, but it's pretty solid. And so the publishing houses will send out these requests at that point in time because they want to actually have them physically on the covers or up on like the sales pages if you're talking, just an ebook.
Mm-mm.
Um, so you as a new author then have to either like put yourself out there and ask an established author if they might be willing to give your book a read, which is just terrifying. It's like going back to the process of querying all over again, which I never knew before I was published. And then oftentimes agents will ask other authors within their agency, and the editorial team will reach out to authors that they have relationships with. So these days, reviews come in, review requests, blurb requests for me come in from all of those different channels.
Yeah. And how much time do you have to fulfill all these requests?
I know. I know. Okay, so, I I can't speak for anyone else, but I know that there are some rumors out there in the world of authors who just say yes to every book blurb request and they don't necessarily read everything. Now, I don't know anyone in my circle of writer friends for whom that is true, but I have had to turn down a lot of requests just because of time, because I am physically then going to commit to reading that book. So not only is it going to be hours of my reading time, but I also want to make sure that I'm excited about the book, because I have stacks and stacks, as you know, of books waiting to be read around the house. So you do kind of have to prioritize, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's, well, and I know I that was a loaded question because I knew the answer. Like,
Yeah.
I know that you get a lot of requests, and there are times where you have to say no because it's right in the middle of your writing schedule, and you just do not have the time to, or it's a very similar book to what you're writing, and I mean, you could probably talk about that too. That it makes it hard, right?
Right.
If you
Yeah. If it's something really similar and I'm right in the middle of writing, if I already have like, just last month I had a backlog of review requests, of blurb requests. So I just was like, I got 3 in within a week from different publishing houses, and I was like, gosh, I really can't, even if it's a project that I'm really excited about. And what sucks on the other end of that is I know that there's an author and they were probably like, "Well, we asked Ellie and she said no." Or you want to be like, "No, it was not because I didn't want to read your book. I promise. I just
Right.
didn't have time." And sometimes, most usually, editors and or agents are reaching out with a really nice window, but every once in a while, like, I got a request a couple weeks ago and the editor was like, "I need it in 2 weeks." I'm like, "I just
Ooh.
absolutely I can't turn it around that fast." But usually, you're talking like they'll give you at least 3 to 4 months to
Oh, okay.
get a blurb together.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say is if I were an author, I would not make it if you got 2 weeks to turn around a book. I don't read a book in 2 weeks, like, that is not, well, maybe some of Martha Wells and James Rollins' books I'll read in 2 weeks, but I don't know. Does it ever feel like homework? Like, it feels like it would feel like you're back in school and now you've got a reading assignment, right? Because not
Um,
only do you have to read it, but then you have to write something good about it, which as a writer, I guess, maybe not that challenging, but
no, I think that's super challenging because then you wanna come up with something, like, really clever and witty, especially if I have loved the book. So, just to circle back, though, to your question about, do you read them? Yes, I read every book that I blurb, but there have been a couple books that I got asked to blurb that I got partway through and, for whatever reason, the story just wasn't resonating with me, and so at that point in time, then I just don't send in a blurb, which again, is super crummy on the other end of things because that could just, be timing, or it could be that, like, oh, it wasn't a match for me, but
well, you respond, though. You don't just
oh, yeah.
ghost these people.
No, no, no.
I just wanted to clarify for
Right.
those listening, yeah, it's like, yeah, wow, Ellie, okay.
Okay, darlings, you're out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I had agreed to, blurb a book that I was really excited about. And, I got the digital copy from, the editor, like, in October, and I knew that it was due in mid-January, and when I had opened the book, it wouldn't open in the format that they had sent it, and, I totally spaced it, and then a couple weeks until the deadline, I was like, "Oh, I gotta read that book," and I clicked the file again, and I was like, "Oh, shoot, that's right. I need to get a different file." And so that did feel like homework because I had to read that book in, like, a week and a half, and I was, as you know, deep in writing and editing a project of my own, so, I ended up loving the book, so it was totally worth it, but, that was a fail on my end in terms of balancing my own schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, the tech issues.
Tech issues, yeah, it's true, it's very true.
Right.
So yeah, timing plays in, and then, if you are putting your name on something, you want to make sure that what you're saying is legible, that is hopefully gonna entice a reader to be excited to buy the book too. So that always feels like a lot of pressure because it's only, at most a few sentences or a paragraph. So to wrap up a book that you've enjoyed in that tight amount of space is always a little bit of pressure too.
Yeah, it is. It's a very small space. That just you saying like that, if you're going to put your name on something, that makes me think that most authors probably do read all the books that they're asked to blurb because even if it's a writer you don't know, maybe that writer decided this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one where I just offend everyone. And
Right. Yeah.
and then if you're like, "Oh, like, so and so like, always writes great stuff. I love it, blah, blah, blah," and then they're like, "Ah, Ellie Alexander thinks this too. Oh, no."
Yeah, exactly, right? Um, yeah, and that really ties into making sure that, you are finding the right and this is, for our darlings out there maybe who are on the writing side of things, and they are thinking about the fact that, "Okay, my book is coming out in a few months. I might need to be on the other end of this," and start thinking about requests. You want to ask an author who's writing in the same genre as you, because over the years, I have gotten at least, I would
Oh, yeah.
say, a few dozen requests to blurb bloody, bloody thrillers and things that are super dark, which A, is not really my jam in terms of reading to begin with, so I'm not gonna be a great match for that. And also, all of our darlings and our readers are pretty cozy or, like, cozy
Right.
adjacent. So, that is not gonna be a good match, because likely then let's say, if I go back to your well, I would read everything that you talked about, but let's say it's like something like true crime that's super dark, a lot of gore, maybe a kid is murdered in it, like all the things that you're not gonna find in my books. But a reader happens to pass, that title on an end cap and see my name on it, they might think like, "Oh, hey, this is another cozy. I love cozies. I haven't seen this yet," and buy that book and then be like, "Oh my gosh, this is not at all what I was anticipating."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, some of those darker ones, I know when they've come in, you felt bad because you do want to, review something for someone, but, um, I offered to read them because that's kinda my jam, but I don't think a blurb from the tech guy was what they were after, so
I don't know, maybe we should start some sort of petition for that.
I'm not sure people would be like, "Who the who?" Yeah.
Tell me again? What are we doing?
Right.
But,
Right.
this is a little bit of a segue, but you are reading a book very quickly right now,
I
under
am.
duress
Yeah.
from yours truly.
But I'm not blurbing it. I'm
Wait,
reading it, but
you won't blurb it for me?
am I supposed to blurb it? Okay,
Maybe.
well, I guess so.
So darlings, I have a new spy thriller. Well, it's not really it's hard to say spy thriller because then you're gonna think what I just said about, this very dark. It's in the cozy world. It's like if Agatha Christie had a set of sleeper cell spies in the little cozy village with her. But my beta readers have finished with it and I did another edit and now the tech guy is the last touch before I send it into my editor. Though the pressure is on.
It is on. I know. I got it. Like I'm sitting here, we're recording this, and I'm thinking that I should be reading. What do you call it? Cozy adjacent.
Yeah, I think
The
so.
writing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I
you
got
feel
distracted. An ad for a Martha Wells book came up on the screen down here, so I got distracted.
did it really?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's listening to us all the time.
I know, I know. Go back and listen to our AI episode from last week if you have
Right.
questions. Um, do you feel the pressure when you're, reading my stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd feel pressure no matter whose stuff I was reading, but I think it's a little different when I'm like, I live with the person who's constantly thinking up new ways to off people. So that's when I get I'd walk in, get home from work, and you'd be like, "Here, taste this." Just be like, "Wait, what? I don't know."
I think the darlings might be interested in, like, what it's like to, provide feedback, and this is feedback from I've done, like, 3 drafts, I would say now of this and gotten feedback more widely, but you, over the years, have given lots of feedback in the process.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think that's ever been a problem. I mean, I think we like because you're good, you know when to be like, "Yeah, that's great, but, like, this is what I'm going for," and I'm not typically, those were cozy mysteries, and
Mhm.
I don't read, I read yours, and that's about it, but I think I've never been afraid to give you feedback, it's just because I know you'll take what you want and you'll just say, if if my feedback's coming from the wrong lens, like, that's easy for you to filter out too, so
Yeah, but your feedback, I mean, it's always super helpful, but I think it's gonna be especially helpful in this one because you do read a lot more that is closer to this genre, I would say, too.
yeah, yeah, I did, and this is I'm gonna say this, and you're gonna be mad because it's going to generate a lot of questions, from,
Ooh.
readers out there, but the series I did love reading the most about because I could give a lot of feedback and a lot of input to is the Sloane Krause mysteries because I do all the beer stuff, and that required research, so I read a lot of those at breweries, that I had to get in the frame of mind to read the book, so
Huh, I like it. Well, I'm gonna be really curious to hear from the darlings in terms of your thoughts on blurbs and whether or not they have swayed you to pick up a title or if you just completely look past them. It's interesting because Simon and Schuster, who my new spy cozy is going to be with, they just announced this week that one of their um imprints is doing away with blurbs. They're done with it. And so they went through a lot of reasons. They felt like it's a big ask for editors. It does, like on that end, it takes a lot of time because editors are reaching out to dozens of authors, hoping that two or three or four will say yes. That it's a big ask for authors who are like we've talked about, doing a lot of work themselves and then having to put that aside.
yeah.
Um, in fact, one of the comments in fact, I'll make sure to share the article on my social just because I think it's an interesting read once we release this episode, but, one of the commenters was like, "Oh, authors are probably not getting their own writing done because they're spending so much time writing blurbs." And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, no, I would never." I always I mean, one of the perks, I think, of blurbing is getting to read stuff that I'm super excited about a few months early. It's like, darlings, if you're on NetGalley and you get approved to read a copy early, it's the same kind of vibe for me as an author. I get super excited, but I am never gonna put my own work aside to blurb something like.
Right, right. Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. I wouldn't that's funny. I would never think that. I mean, I think it'd always be secondary for most authors. I guess, blurbing a book can be a great opportunity for authors too. Like, if you get asked to do it, like, getting your name out there is, like, it's always a good thing, right?
That's exactly what I was gonna say, like, there are quite a few pros getting to read something early, making connections with an author that you might not have been connected with. In fact, I have a couple blurbs of recent stuff that I'm gonna do or that I've already done that I thought I could share here on this podcast, but, I've also gotten connected to authors that who I wasn't aware of, from request from their agents and editors, so that's great, and then, yes, it's great for an author, especially if you're a new author, to have your name on somebody else's book, because a reader might be flipping through and go, "Oh, I haven't heard of this author, but, I'm gonna check out her work now."
Right. Yeah. So how does a new author go about getting people to provide a blurb?
Yeah,
Um,
I know.
that's gotta be challenging, right? Because you don't wanna be really pushy, but if you don't have a built-in network of friends who are published authors, like, you've gotta reach out. So how do they go
Mhm.
about it?
Yes, you just have to rip the Band-Aid off and do it, and it's a lot like querying, you're back in that process again. For me, I made a list of some of my, like, top 10 dream cozy writers, and I sent them to my editor and to my agent to see if either of them knew authors on those lists, which they did. So that helps. It really helps if you have that support. But if you're independently publishing, you can do the same thing. I think just reaching out to authors and make sure this is something that I talk about all the time in my coaching and in our Mystery Series Masterclass. You want to have actually read that author's work. Like, don't just mass query authors. That's never fun because an author's going to tell. And again, do your research and don't query somebody to read your cozy blurb if they write spicy romance, But
Yeah.
reach out, make the ask, and then, be prepared that you will probably get some no's and try not to take that personally because like I'm saying, a lot of times it is just scheduling and you might be able to then also just make an initial meetup with an author who you weren't familiar or who wasn't familiar with you before. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have a comment about blurbs from a design standpoint.
Oh, interesting.
Something occurred to me that, if you're an author and you plan on getting blurbs or trying to get blurbs for your book, you need to take that into account before the cover design is finalized. Like your cover designer, whether that's you or somebody you've hired or whatever, needs to know that there's going to be a blurb so that they can plan for it in the cover because, a lot of the blurbs go at the top, like then they're centered, but it makes a big difference. Like if you've got like white sky up there or a lot of dark clouds, the font choice, the colors, the placement, all of that stuff needs to be accounted for. And probably asking for the length of the blurb to be very specific, like no more than 1 sentence or no more than 2 sentences, just so you can because you don't want the blurb to be super small and unreadable. Uh,
Yes. No, I think that's a super excellent point, and, what I will do from a writing perspective is I'll usually and I'll share a couple examples in a minute here, but I'll write, a short paragraph, and then what the editor will do is they will take a pull quote from that, I always end my blurbs with something that's just, like a must read or, something that is just easy to put on the top cover. But yeah, you're totally right. And then
Okay.
the other thing about putting yourself out there as a new author is I remember when I got my very first blurb that I got back. Was from Kate Carlisle. And I had read every single title she had ever written. I was in love with her work, and I just, like, bawled when, my editor was like, "Hey, we got a blurb back from Kate Carlisle." I'm like, "Kate Carlisle is, like, reading my book?" Like, and so I love to be able to do that for new writers too. So odds are authors are gonna be cheering you on, so you should make the ask.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of support, and I remember that. I remember you getting the word from your agent on that and how excited we were about that, and, that was a big deal. At the time, it was a really big deal for you, so it was awesome.
So cool. Yeah. So cool to have an author who you love, who is reading your book and enjoying your book. And then, another thing is just to make sure that then you reach out and thank those authors.
Mm.
Um, I've
Send
created
gift baskets,
yeah,
but no, I'm totally kidding,
chocolate,
totally
cat,
kidding, do
wine.
not
No,
yeah,
we're
no,
joking. We're
yeah,
joking. No.
yeah,
A thank you note will suffice.
right.
A quick email, whatever. Yeah. And then it's always fun because sometimes I will get the physical copy of a book that I've blurbed later. Like, I blurbed Gigi's, new series when it first came out, Under Lock and Skeleton Key, the first book of that, and her editor sent me a signed copy of the book, so that's always fun to have in my collection too.
Yeah. So a new writer reaches out to an author for a blurb, like how many times should they follow up? Like 8, 9, 10?
What?
No,
Yeah.
I asked that in jest, but I do wanna talk about that because I see all the questions and things that come in through the website, and so I see this a lot for you, which is where somebody will reach out, and if they don't hear from you in a day, they'll reach out
Yeah,
again, and then if
right.
they don't hear from you, it'll again and again and again, and it's just like, "Oh my goodness," like, you
Take a
gotta
break.
to just take a breath
Yeah.
and just be patient, like there are a lot of other things going on here. So, um, yeah. So, I mean, like, what do you suggest because authors are very busy people, professional authors, people who make a living writing, people who work another full time job and write.
Yeah.
are very busy people, and
Right.
if you reach out, you're not gonna get a response back in 24 hours. You're just not.
No,
So
never. Yeah. And that's true for, like, editorial staff. Like, I've gotten requests from, like, big publishing houses, and I'm not always responding right away, especially if I'm deep in the middle of work myself. I would say, if you haven't heard in a few weeks, maybe, like, mark on your calendar if you send out a request and then give it 3 weeks, and you haven't heard, then it would be appropriate to just check in and say, "Hey, no pressure. I'm just seeing if this is a possibility. Absolutely, no worries. If not, thanks so much for your time and consideration." Done, and then if you don't hear after that, drop it and move on to somebody
okay,
else.
that's
Like,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say that's probably from a sales perspective. You might get salespeople to be like, "Oh, no, you gotta follow," but that's not what you're doing here. You're not selling anything. You're,
No.
you're asking for a very big favor from an author, and so you just need to just be respectful and don't expect a response in 24 hours.
No, and, like I said, I think the vast majority of authors want to provide blurbs and help a new author in their process too. So if it's a no, try to just take that with a grain of salt and move along. And, maybe the next book that author is going to have time and space to be able to blurb it. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I thought it might be fun to share. These are 3 books that I've read in the last 3 or 4 months that I have absolutely loved, and they're all coming out within the next few months. So I thought it might be interesting to, read the blurbs and, let's see if, darlings, you are then compelled
If
to
they're
go.
sold if they're
If they're
sold
full,
on the
yeah,
books?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Right.
And again, these are 3 books that I read on my own time. I did not get paid for these blurbs, and I'm very excited for you to read all 3 of these. So, the
Were
first
any
one
of
is
these books by Martha Wells?
none of these. I've never been asked by
Mhm.
Martha, sorry.
Oh, well,
You might.
you wouldn't though.
No, but you might.
Going back to only ask people in your genre, so
Right.
yeah.
Sci-fi, murder bot,
Damn it.
fantasy, standard, EQ mystery. Okay, this is A Beauty Queen's Guide to Murder and Mayhem by Kristen Bird. Kristen has been writing for a long time, not an author I was familiar with. Can't wait to read more of her stuff. Here's my blurb. One thing I never knew was missing from the cozy mystery world: beauty queens. Kristen Bird's delightful new novel has quickly filled that gap. Dakota, a spunky, modern sleuth, doesn't let high heels or outdated gender roles get in the way of her relentless pursuit of the truth and her quest to build a new life. A Beauty Queen's Guide to Murder and Mayhem is a charming romp featuring a quirky cast of characters with big hearts and witty humor, all set against the unforgettable backdrop of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Grab your sequins and your tiara. This one's a sparkling good read.
Nice. Nice.
So that last line there, that is what could go at the very top, right?
Right, right, and so that's actually a good point because that was interesting that you said that the editor or whoever, the publisher, will take pull quotes from the paragraphs. So that's why you see ellipses used a lot
Yeah.
in blurbs on books. Like the author didn't write, you know, uh, what and then the dot dot dot, and then finish their sentence
Right.
that happened after the fact. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Okay, the next one, and I should say, A Beauty Queen Guide to Murder and Mayhem comes out at the end of February. It comes out this month.
Uh,
Grab this is cozy. It's great.
and who is the author again?
Kristen Bird.
Okay.
Kristen Bird. Okay, the next one is Kate and Frida by Kim Fay. And I have to tell you, I read Love and Saffron, Kim Fay's first book, a few years ago, and it is one of my favorite books of all time. I've given it to so many people. I did not know Kim before this, but I've shared about it on my social. If I love a book, I'm going to talk about a book. And so we just like connected through DMs, and I found her so great. And she reached out to me to ask if I might be willing to give this an early read and potentially provide a blurb. And I was like, um, when can I say yes? And of course, for this one, I dropped everything, because I knew I was so excited to read it. So, Here's my blurb for that. I devoured Kate and Frida in one leisurely, lovely weekend. It's the kind of book that wraps you up in a warm, cozy hug. The story transported me back to the early 90s when I was coming of age and writing long letters to friends as we scattered in all directions and tried to carve out our own little piece of the world. Kate and Frida's friendship is set against the backdrop of Seattle and Paris in the glorious pre internet 90s, when a simple book request leads to a string of letters and a lasting connection. From the turbulence of war and struggling with anxiety, loss, and finding their own narratives, Faye masterfully weaves Kate and Frida's adventures, challenges, and triumphs together in one delicious bundle of handwritten notes with just the right touch of delectable food. It is Paris, after all. The story is a poignant reminder of the enduring power of books, food, and friendship. This is a must read.
Ooh, man,
Yeah,
the cover designer in me is like, how the heck do I fit that on the cover? So yeah, the pull quote thing is like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense now.
exactly. I'm sure it will be that last line or even something like it's the kind of book that wraps you up in a warm, cozy hug or, something like that.
Right, right.
But then the longer quotes, blurbs go on the inside, so
Okay,
that's when you see those first few pages after the copyright and you'll see the whole blurb sometimes.
okay. S
Um, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so it's kind of a big deal if you're the author that gets chosen to be the cover blurb
Yeah.
over there. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Cover blurb, and then, there's also, like I'm holding up a book, darling, so there's also ooh, go this way, a bunch of,
On the back.
yeah, on the back too. And then the other thing with timing that we didn't even talk about is that there's also some pressure if you say yes, because if a lot of other authors have already blurbed it, then I'm thinking like, "Oh my gosh, what am I gonna say that's new at all?" Because
Oh, right.
10 other authors have blurbed this and loved it too. But,
Yeah.
uh, Kate and Frida comes out in March, and it is just, like I said, a book that wraps you up in a warm hug. Not a mystery, very cozy, lots of food, friendship, great. And then last but not least, I just read Welcome to Murder Week by Karen Dukas. I hope that's how you say her last name. And my blurb is Welcome to your perfect escape. If Jane Austen stepped into a cozy mystery, she would find herself in Wisteria Cottage, unraveling clues in a cleverly staged murder. Picture a charming, eccentric English village where everyone plays a part. Add a touch of romance and an unsolved family saga, and you've got the perfect reading escape. Welcome to Murder Week is witty, heartfelt, and utterly unputdownable. Add it to your TBR immediately.
Whoa.
I know. And that one comes out in June. And one thing that we didn't talk about is so, darlings who are listening, sometimes the publishing houses, I'm showing a copy of what's called the galley, or the advanced reader copy. Sometimes I will get a physical copy like this because the publisher will bind the book and send it to you. And sometimes I'll get an e-copy. But it's always kind of fun to see the evolution of how the galleys play out.
Are the print galleys, those are getting more and more rare, right? Like,
They are getting more and more rare.
yeah. It's just
Yeah,
it's expensive to
it's
print them
expensive.
and send them out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, that I think that's blurbs in a nutshell. I don't think we missed anything, but, I'll be eager to hear what the darlings think and
Yeah.
how you fall on the blurbing.
How's your blurb going today? Yeah. Have you
Exactly.
have you blurbed yet this morning? Yeah. Can just blurb is a cool word, so you have some fun with that.
Excellent. Well, on that note, darlings, happy reading, happy blurbing, and, I hope you'll go check out a few of these if, I've tempted you with my blurbs.
All right. Until next time.
Till next time.